freedom at any price for our children's and children's children's sake.
Okay, I'm with a very dear friend here at Liberty University School of Business. You just heard why we're here. We're keeping Christian in our culture. And I have a dear friend, David Barton, historian. Oh my goodness, I don't even know how to describe you because there are just too many adjectives since we've known each other like 25 years.
Yeah.
But you know, here today, David Barton, you might know as a historian, and Wallbuilders. And if you haven't looked at Wallbuilders' website, you must, because you will find real history. And so I appreciate that you're sitting down with us here at Liberty because in keeping Christian in our culture, you talked about history. And one of the things you said in your presentation was a comparison of the 1619 project and the 1620. Elaborate on that, because I think very, very few know that there's a reason they picked 1619, and it is anti-Christianity.
It is.
That was a part of our foundation.
And you've made an important part too, because knowing history is that's what defines a nation. And it's interesting that when we saw the wall come down in Soviet Russia back in the late 80s, one of the first indicators was they started rewriting their history. And so about a decade or so before the change happens, you start representing who you are, and people grow up thinking, hey, this is the way we are, this is the way we've always been. If that's not true, they become something that they've never been. And so what's happening in America is we know so little about our own history that we're being told this is who we were.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true, but if we believe that, we start acting like it.
Right.
And so the Bible tells us, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he.
Right.
If you get wrong historical information, you'll have wrong actions as a result, you get wrong policies. So 1619 starts with the premise that America was founded with the proposition of protecting and preserving slavery. That was our number one issue from the beginning. We wanted to be a slave nation. We wanted to protect slavery. We were all about slavery. And we go from there, and it is true that America had slavery. That's a blemish on it. And as a historian, you teach the good, the bad, the ugly. So while we can teach 1619 project, yes, there was slavery, the rest of it is, but that was not the intent, and that was not the purpose. And people who came here that knew the Bible, they made that a big issue. And so the abolition movement came out of Pilgrims and Puritans, the guys who ended slavery, the guys who fought for equality. And so we're not talking about them. We're only talking about the oppressors and the oppression.
And that was in 1620, is
that was
what you pointed out. 1620, we had this movement of pilgrims.
That's right.
Elaborate, tell us, because you're right. Most people don't know the 1619 didn't happen in a vacuum. And in fact, when the president at that point, Donald Trump, was confronted with that 1619 project, they immediately jumped to 1776.
That's
and it's
right.
like, wait a minute, we have a history, and you even talked about it today here at Liberty, that Mayflower Compact. So tell us a little bit about 1620.
The Pilgrims came here as a group that was interested in the Bible. They came out of Europe, and in Europe there was a movement called the Reformation that has been started by Catholic priests who said, oh my gosh, people don't know the Bible. We don't know the Bible. We've been doing stuff for 1,000 years that contradicts the Bible. And so people like Tyndale and Wycliffe and other famous names started trying to get the Bible in the hands of individual citizens.
Right.
And so the Pilgrims in 1560, that group became some of the first ever to actually be able to possess a Bible, first in 1,000 years to have their own individual Bibles. All Bibles had been chained to the pulpit of churches.
I remember the story of Tyndale. It was on his deathbed. He said, open the eyes of the king. And that's when we ended up with the King James Bible, 20-something years later, but it happened.
And it was a Bible that people could handle.
That people could have and read.
And so these pilgrims would spend 4 to 8 hours a day in the Bible. And they said, hey, look at what it says about economics.
Wow.
Oh, look at what it says about equality and race.
Wow.
Oh, look at what it says about education. Look at what it says about so many issues. And so they are the ones who started the first free market system. I mean, we often talk about Adam Smith. No, Pilgrims beat him by 100 years. They're the guys who said education for everybody, boys and girls. And nobody was educating girls at that time in world history. The Pilgrims were. So you look at these guys, and when slaves came to the Plymouth colony, they freed all the slaves and imprisoned all the slave owners.
That's exactly right.
And that's significant stuff. And so what people don't hear today, they hear the blemishes of America, but I'll point out that New England area of the Pilgrims was the first area in the world to ban slavery. By 1804, every northern colony had banned slavery. Nobody in the world did that before the that Pilgrim area did it. 1807, America becomes the first nation in the world to ban the slave trade. Nobody did it before America. We became the fourth nation in the world to ban slavery. So And think
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And in fact, up in New England, with those colonies, they were also the ones that, even with slavery amongst them, they were passing manumission laws and trying to work through, as we try to work through now on the pro-life causes. It's like, okay, this is our reality, but can we make it better even while we're trying to abolish? But I want to, before we run out of time, because I want to get to another point that you made in your presentation. You talked about two Americas, but usually we hear about capitalism, socialism, but you said we had America of Pilgrims and America of Jamestown, because I want to look at this history, because the history is being rewritten and it's being destroyed, and we need to, in order to keep Christianity in our culture, we've got to know the truth. So tell us about that inflection point of Christianity.
Jamestown was a bunch of professing Christians, but they didn't study and read the Bible. They didn't know it. They did whatever the church told them. They went to church and they had the church among them, but they were terrible in their relations toward the natives. They took private property. They did not recognize the natives' property. They had no good relations. They started wars with the natives. They were elitist. They thought there were classes of people. Some were more worthy of things than others. Not all people were equal. They did not give education to many people, and certainly not to women. They did have slavery, and they did allow slavery and promote slavery. There's just so many. They were a very lazy culture.
Very different than from the biblical Christians of the Pilgrims.
Now, when you get to the Pilgrims, these guys did not allow slavery. They did promote equality. The longest-lasting treaty in American history between Native Americans and Anglos is with the Pilgrims. They did not take a foot of land unless they paid for it and had a title deed to it. Their respect for equality of others. It's just, there's so many things that are different, and that version, the Pilgrims, is actually what won the Civil War. That mentality is what won, and that's what defined America.
They were the abolitionists, and I think that we have to keep that alive. There were just so many good men, and for us to now be dealing with all of this race discussion that tries to pretend all whites were evil, I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you are doing today, and that you've done throughout your career to bring truth to history. And you can see that at that Wallbuilders. He's done every kind of research you can think about in our country and our founding fathers. But before I let you go, I want to come to today, because that point you just made about the two Christian, we're dealing with that now. We have a breakdown in our society with the church. That we have some that have bought into this whole social justice movement. Speak into that. Is there a thread of that pilgrim kind of Christian, that biblical Christian, still alive? And if it is still alive, will it succeed in trying to keep Christianity in our culture?
You know, that's a great question, Star. We do a lot of polling work with George Barton, particularly National Pollster.
George is a dear
And what
friend.
we know right now is that with 384,000 churches in America, churches, senior pastors.
Wait, how many?
384,000 churches, senior pastors in America. 72% of those pastors say they do not agree with the Bible's fundamental teachings.
No wonder our culture is so lost.
That's right. So we have all these churches, and 3 out of 4 say we don't agree with the Bible's teachings.
Oh, no.
Now, 107,000 pastors say they do agree.
How do they even get away with being a pastor? But okay, go ahead.
See, this is the problem.
Oh, no.
This is why the culture is what it is, because those who profess faith, they're like Jamestown. They profess faith, but they're not doing anything biblical.
But they're not doing the biblical.
There's 107,000 that are biblical, but the problem with it is they believe that, well, I shouldn't carry my faith into the public. And so they're very compartmentalized.
But that remnant, there's 100,000 that believe the Bible.
But here's the problem. Only 9% of Christians read the Bible on a daily basis, and only 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview.
Oh, dear.
So only 1 out of 16 actually see things the way the Bible says. We don't know the book anymore. And that's what's hurting us more than anything, is those who profess Christ don't know what he teaches.
Well, let me ask you this, because now we're seeing a demand against the public schools, if you will. This might be a time for us to say no more of this government one-size-fits-all experiment. And Christianity is now being talked about, putting it back into people, the youth. Do you think that there's an opportunity to get Christianity back into our schools so that the kids will be reading that Bible every single day?
Yeah, there's an opportunity, and I don't call them public schools, because Christian schools are really public schools. They do a better job of serving the public than the government schools do. I call them secular government schools, because that's government schools that demand that you be secular. It used to be government schools were neutral in religion, and you could have religion.
We thought they were, but go ahead.
They thought they were, but not anymore.
That point, but not anymore.
So what we have now is in America, we have roughly, recent polling, 2 out of 3 Americans want complete school choice. They want to have a choice of Christian schools or whatever. So 2 out of 3. Most state legislatures are not moving there. Now, we saw, for example, in Florida, Governor DeSantis just said, hey, you know what? we'll fund Christian schools. If you're tired of mask at public schools, go to Christian schools.
No, we're getting there, and we're going to talk
there.
about keeping Christianity in the culture in our schools later in the program. So I appreciate that you pointed to that, and especially the complacency of the church. So I think that there might need to be an uprising in the pews to say, Pastor, you need to start reading that Bible, because now I'm reading it and I'm finding out that what you're saying is not true.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
my friend.
Star. Thanks for all you do, girl.
Thanks for all you do, too. I'll be right back.
It's time for a cure. CURE is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
Still here live at Liberty University in their School of Business, and I have another friend I ran into that I know is an expert on Christianity in our schools. Rod, thank you for joining us. Rod Martin, your resume is so long, and we've known each other so long that I wouldn't even know where to begin to introduce you, even though I do know that you're on the advisory committee for the School of Business here at Liberty.
I am, which is a great honor. I get to work with Dave Brat and Ryan Helfenbein and a bunch of wonderful people here. I was one of the early guys at PayPal, as you know. We have a hedge fund. We have a bunch of technology investments, but I'm also on the board of Truett McConnell University in Georgia, used to be on the board of Criswell College in Texas, and Hannibal LaGrange University in Missouri, all Christian schools. And I'm on the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention.
You know, I think that what's happening in the Christian schools, the universities, is just starting to realize in our country that what they've done here at Liberty, turned their student body from 15,000 to what is it now, 100,000 students?
Like 120,000.
120,000 students overnight, because people are fed up with what we used to call public education that's now just government-funded, union-controlled cesspools, whether it's K through 12 or at the university level. So with your experience in these universities, what are you thinking about now, K through 12? Are we going to see this revolution of Christians finally saying, you've done enough? The LGBTQ, we can't fight it anymore. The critical race theory, we can't fight anymore. We don't even want to keep running for your school boards to keep trying to push secularism out of our schools. We're leaving. We're going to go Christian. Is it time?
Well, I think from a political point of view, and of course, in my earlier life, I was policy director for Mike Huckabee, and we did a lot of work on education at the governmental level.
I think that's when I first met you.
Yeah, I'm the grandchild of a school superintendent. So, you know, I have deep roots in the public schools, but the truth is, these are not your father's public schools. This is changing rapidly in a horrifying direction that you don't have control over. And you see in Loudoun County, you know, parents, even teachers can't get a word in edgewise with these people. It is a completely different world now. So yes, even though my wife and I are the children of school teachers, and we actually were in public schools ourselves, we homeschooled, we Christian schooled when we, for whatever reason, couldn't homeschool. We are believers in pulling children out of the schools and educating them properly with a biblical foundation. If you are giving your child over to the public schools to be indoctrinated in critical race theory, critical theory generally, Marxism, essentially, you can't expect your preacher 1 or 2 or 3 hours a week to compete with that. They're in that school all day, every day. They got homework at night. They've got extracurriculars over the weekend. They are absolutely drinking deeply of that. And if you think that a kindergartner can be a missionary to a kindergarten teacher, if you think that a 9th grader can be a missionary to an English teacher who is teaching post-colonial literature or whatever, you're absolutely crazy. They are not missionaries, they are disciples, and you are having the public schools disciple your children. It's time to stop.
You know, I'm wondering, though, if the parents are ready for that, because I think that a materialism has slipped into the body of Christ to where people think, but I want them to go to Harvard, and they are still ignoring that all of the Ivy Leagues are gone, that all of the public schools are gone. I don't care what neighborhood you live in. That government-funded, union-controlled school is no longer one where they can have the values that are consistent with what you just described. So are the parents going to get there to say, maybe it's more important, the little heart of my child, than where, who my social club is?
Well, first of all, my son, Archer, whom you know, was homeschooled and Christian schooled and graduated from Harvard and Yale. So the idea that homeschoolers and Christian schoolers can't do that is crazy. And I don't know who could possibly have a motive to tell you otherwise, except, the teachers union and the Democrats. But aside from that, yeah, he went to Harvard and Yale because of medicine.
Okay.
And most people aren't studying medicine.
That's right.
He's now a doctor at the Mayo Clinic. But if you're studying virtually anything else, you need to be somewhere else. And a school like Liberty University is just extraordinary.
I think that's why it's exploding. It is people
exploding.
Are really looking for an alternative. But I guess my question is it an alternative? Why should we have to build an alternative? Or is it superior? Is this what Christians should be desiring and stop thinking of the elite secular as their salvation?
No, this is actually superior.
Yeah.
Now, not every Christian school is. I wish they were. But when you look at standardized test scores on Christian schools K through 12, our schools beat the public schools all day long and twice on Sunday. So don't pretend otherwise. Right. And most Christian schools are not that expensive. This is something that normal parents can do. If they can't do that, they can certainly homeschool. We homeschooled. It was not that hard. It was just deliberate. It was a priority. And so we made it happen. But at the college level, no. A school like Liberty University is absolutely superior because the foundation of knowledge is God as he has revealed himself in his word. And when you go to be taught, quote unquote, by people who deny the fundamental realities of the universe,
right.
You're not actually learning anything that useful. So you're getting a better education here, but also with 120,000 students at Liberty, if you don't think you've got a networking opportunity here, you're crazy. There's a great networking opportunity at Stanford, but there actually today may be a better networking opportunity at Liberty.
I think now what came to mind as you were talking, it's almost like a separate but equal now, because we've got the sacred, we've got the secular, and we're dividing up that way as a country. Well, it divided up that way before on race lines, and we know that is not a good idea. But I'm wondering, personally even, if it is a good idea for us just to say, we will be cordial in the public space where our lives touch, but it's time for our lives not to touch anymore, including when it comes to educating children. Am I going too far over to the dark side?
I think that makes a lot of sense because, look, my child is not a public good. My child is my child. I owe my child a quality education. I owe my child to have his thinking subverted from the womb.
You're hearing about people that the teachers are saying, don't tell your parents what we're teaching you in class. They're like, this is insane.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And I can't imagine why any parent would tolerate that for a second. But in the public system, increasingly, you have no choice but to tolerate that because you have no choice at all. And as citizens, we have a responsibility, I believe, to work for better public policy so that the public schools are better again. They used to be better, and they used to actually provide a good education that wasn't inherently anti-Christian. But the truth is, now they don't even provide a good education.
I know.
When Scott Walker faced that huge teacher strike in Wisconsin a few years ago, 2/3 of Wisconsin 8th graders could not read at grade level.
It's crazy.
The public schools are not underperforming. They are not performing
at all.
And if you want your child to actually be able to read and write and be able to do basic math and have a future, you need to get them out of the gender studies program.
Right.
And into real education. And that means Christian schools.
I 100% agree with you. And I think that the moment is now because parents have been exposed over the last year with COVID, how cruel those government bureaucrats are, that they'll just shut you out.
Yes.
They'll lock your kid out of school. They don't care that he's fallen a year and a half behind. But also they were exposed to what is being taught. So is this a new day? Are we going to see Christianity return to our culture because we're educating our children?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, already in California, where you actually have to register to homeschool, which is horrifyingly wrong, but nevertheless, in California, since COVID, We have already seen a doubling of the number of parents who have sought to register to homeschool. That's remarkable in California. And in the rest of the country, it's exploding because, as you know, we found out during COVID that you could actually do online education at home and your child be fine. And so that's the genie out of the bottle.
So.
There are tremendous Christian schooling programs that are available online now.
I love it.
You know, so many I can't even count them anymore.
I know.
And they are fantastic. And so if a parent feels inadequate to do some of those things, you don't have to do those things like you would have 30, 40 years ago.
System,
There are fantastic teachers who are perfectly well qualified to handle this. Your child studies at home. You're looking over them. They're not getting bullied. They're not getting taught about, transgender
things that
sex
are
in first
inconsistent
grade.
with scriptures. No, you know what? I could talk to you all day, and I know that you could listen to them all day, but I think that Rod has encouraged you to go ahead and just pull the trigger. Come on, just do it. I think that it's time. It is really time. Thank you so much for joining us here. We're Cure America with Star Parker, but we're here in your territory now at Liberty in the School of Business. I'll be right back. Well, still here at Liberty University in their School of Business, and I ran into a dear friend, one of our advisory board members at curepolicy.org, but an economist. Many of you might read him often, technology guru, my goodness, Dr. George Gilder, my friend. And in fact, if you ever visit Cure's office, you'll see a whole lot of Gilder on my bookshelf.
Yeah, and I just got awarded a doctorate from Cure.
That's
right?
why I keep calling you doctor. I'm calling you a doctor because I think economic professionals should be doctors. You know,
right.
The people that call themselves doctors outside of medicine, I'm just not sure about them. They do a lot in education, but they don't know what you know. And in fact, one of the things you said, I was telling you about my bookshelf. Yeah, anything from Men in Marriage to Wealth and Poverty, to now that new one that's been out a couple of years, bestseller, Life After Google. I want to get into that a little bit, but this is George Gilder. If you are not familiar, then you must become familiar. You've got to get into the minds that have been thinking about freedom for a really long time, and you're one of them. Oh, also the Discovery Institute. You founded that.
Yes, co-founder of Discovery, and I'm about to hold a big conference in Seattle called COSM. It's COSM.technology. You can find it.
They can find it there. Good, because you want to know.
Peter Thiel is one of
the
keynoter.
Oh, he's a keynote there too? Yeah.
We're discussing all the new technologies in Life After Google.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You know, I think that Christopher Rufo, who's your mentee, you put him on the map because now he's moved on, but Discovery then got on a lot of people's minds.
Rufo put us on the map, too.
Is that what happened to
He was great.
Well, I knew about you for a long time. But listen, I want to say, you talked about something in your presentation here at Liberty on economics and technology. You talked about faith and wealth, and you said wealth is knowledge, and knowledge is an act of faith. Both wealth and knowledge derive from faith. Please elaborate on what you were telling us.
Well, faith precedes knowledge. I mean, you can't know anything unless you presume an intelligible universe, accessible to reason, to some degree consistent, to some degree emanating from a rational creator. That's essential to knowledge. Knowledge isn't something that crops up by itself. It's something that proceeds from a mind, and the mind of our maker ultimately.
Yeah, you were talking about even the mind earlier with me and some of my team members, and even last night, and you started talking about human capacity, because there's a lot of discussion now about artificial intelligence. You've written on social policy. Now you're into that whole geek world, if you will, but it's beyond quite a few people. And because this segment is basically keeping Christianity in our culture, you were hopeful that you're never going to replace man with robots. So talk to me a little bit about this artificial intelligence. People are now so scared. They're saying, this is 666. We got to even just destroy our
Elon Musk
phones.
is scared to death. Stephen Hawking is terrified.
Yeah, so tell me why we shouldn't be afraid.
Ray Kurzweil, a friend of mine, a brilliant guy, thinks that artificial intelligence is going to attain a singularity. where it escapes human control altogether and propagates intelligence throughout the universe while we retire to beaches on guaranteed annual income.
Oh, I know. Too many libertarians talking about that too. But I want to know then, why should we not be afraid? Explain in layman's term that human mind and what you were telling me about seeing that cosmos.
Well, the human mind is ultimately you can measure it. It doesn't really capture it, but you can make an effort at measuring the complexity of the human mind through a connectome. Connectome, all the connections of the human mind and nervous system and everything, all those put together could be mapped in some crude way with a map of 21 or zettabytes. 10 to the 21 is a zettabyte. It's one with 21 zeros. I mean, it just
more that we know that we know that we're not going to use all of our mind power. But you were saying that, but in data collection, it's limited.
But and I really came to understand what a zettabyte meant when I was doing a connectome of the internet. And a connectome of the whole internet, every computer, every connection and link of every kind throughout the whole internet takes about a zettabyte to map. In other words, one human mind is as complex by that measure as the entire global internet. But one human mind runs on 10 to 14 watts of power. Well, the global internet takes gigawatts of power.
So maybe the environmentalists should be concerned about that, and they should get more into Christianity.
That's true. But the point is the idea that somehow if you put all the computers in the world into a data center and you interconnect them and you program them with machine learning and ultimately you're going to create something that is more powerful than the distributed intelligence of 8 billion human beings, with each one with a brain more complex than the entire global internet, is just delusional. And the idea that the idea that AI will destroy jobs is nonsense. Okay. We don't get employed because we're unproductive. We get employed because we're productive. That's why we get jobs.
And people are thinking that AI, we're replaced. They're thinking that with the robots, we can be replaced as human. What I'm hearing you say is no, you can't.
Well, we can be replaced. We no longer plow fields with a stick. We got plows but AI will make humans more productive and thus more employable.
Oh, wow. Because you explained about the map. You said that they're trying to map out and make these driverless cars, and so, but some of that's even fruitful because you got a map, and then you said you got the technology, but you need the human mind.
To create an intelligence without a human mind attached to it is worthless. It's because the map is not the territory. You can build beautiful Google Maps, but ultimately it takes a human mind to interpret the territory, the actual objects that the map encompasses or designates.
Well, so I guess your book might not have been welcomed in a lot of circles, Life After Google, because there are people that really have invested a lot of energy and a lot of money into thinking that, we need fewer people in our society, we need fewer people in the world, and now we have all this machinery that's better anyway. So,
well, we've two great economists, Gail Pooley, who is at Discovery, and Marion Tupy, who was at Cato and St. Andrews in Scotland, have developed a whole system of time prices that show that measured the amount of time, you have to work to buy anything. That the more people on the earth, the cheaper everything gets, and more abundant everything gets.
I love it.
And they show it inexorably with the data over the centuries.
Wow.
In the last 20 years, human populations have grown 75%, but the cost of the commodities of life has dropped 75%.
So
the more minds,
the
more productivity, the more knowledge, the more wealth, and
that takes faith. And I just so appreciate you. I could listen to you all day.
Creative the image of our Creator.
Amen. Created in the image of our Creator. Wow, what an exact point from an economist who's looked at all of these things, and yet it all comes back to the conclusion that faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's evidence of the unseen, even though people are constantly trying to explore. So Gilder, thank you so much. George Gilder, I just can't say enough good things about you. I appreciate that you're on our board of advisors at CURE, and I appreciate that you're still contributing to all of us, your intellect, and especially now into this new world of this artificial intelligence.
And life after Google.
There's life after Google. That's his book for you to go and get that at your favorite book outlet. And I'll be right back. We're still here at Liberty in their School of Business, and these children are learning about artificial intelligence and how, as Christians, they need to stay there. They need to push in so that we can be the leaders into the next century. I'll be right back. There's a lot of energy here at Liberty University in their School of Business because they have two conferences going on at the same time. And so we come together during certain segments, and then it breaks off into these different sessions. And some of them are like going to church. But right now I have a special guest with you. Some of you may recognize him because he's a sitting congressman from this area. Bob Good, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Star. It's great to be with you, and I'm proud to be in the fight with you for our country.
It is a good fight for our country. It can be really depressing sometimes, especially in Washington, D.C., but you're out of that place for right now, in your district, telling the truth.
It's great to be back in the district. We have the largest district in Virginia. It's 10,000 square miles, so I am traveling the district this week. But we're being threatened to be called back a week from Monday to vote on the terrible spending that the Senate is working on.
Isn't that terrible? I wonder if the Capitol Hill Club would be open, though, because they don't.
It should
be
open.
They might open just for you guys, because I think they were going to be closed for a little while. And I'm like, but listen, we are where you went to school.
We are.
You met your wife here.
Yes.
You worked here.
Yes,
and then you went to Congress?
My wife and I met here as students, and we married just after college, and then I came back. I went to work with Citigroup for 17 years, and then came back to Liberty 16 years ago, worked here for 15 years in athletics administration, and while I was served in the county board of supervisors here locally, and then ran for Congress. Started that journey about 2 years ago and got elected back in November.
Why?
Well, it was definitely a calling. You know, I think that one of the problems with politics are people who aspire to be in politics are often the wrong kind of people and doing it for the wrong kind of reasons, for selfish, ambitious reasons. And we have too few people who are responding to a call. And for us, it really was an answer to a call. I was 54 years old when we started this journey, and my wife and I prayed about it. We were asked to consider doing it. We knew we needed it to flip our district to a true conservative. So we answered that call. We said, Lord, if you leave the door open, we'll go through it. If you close the door and you've got somebody else in mind, we'll defer and support that person. But the Lord shined his favor on us, and many people supported us. And so we won in November, and here we are.
That is incredible. That's fantastic, because this segment is about Christians in the culture. Can we get Christianity back in our culture? And to go now in government is important, because the way that the country is designed, it's we the people. And if the people are not active in their government, then we're going to have some really bad things happen. You're seeing some of the bad things happen. In fact, why I told our Cure America regular watchers, they may have seen you before, is not because you're a congressman necessarily, or those that are already familiar with Liberty University or live in Virginia. It's because recently you were in a press conference that we aired about January 6th. What you guys did was tremendous. You went over to check on the people that are in that jail. We hearing stories. We don't know anything. It's a federal jail. Some have been there for 6 months.
Right.
You went to check on them, and they kicked you out, said you were trespassing as sitting congressman, and then you went over to Capitol Hill and did a press conference. How important is it that voices, that opposition voice, if you will, the opposition voice of those that now think that our country's secular, think that there's no place for Christianity, trying to cancel us everywhere? How important is it? You guys stood out there in 100 degrees and say, we're going to tell the truth anyway.
It is critically important that we recognize that we are in a fight for the future of our country, that it's all of the line. All of us know people in our circles of influence, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our churches, in our workplaces, who are afraid to be bold and outspoken for the truth because of what's at risk. And what I'm trying to tell folks, it is at risk, and you can't assume that you'll be safe because you're quiet. We have to realize that our country is truly at war with what kind of a country do we want to be? Who do we want to be? Everything that we hold dear, our founding principles, our values are at war, and those are at risk. And so we all have to stand up for what we believe in and be loud and be bold and be strong. And it's worth fighting for. And from a faith standpoint, our workplace should be our primary area of ministry. Because we spend most of our time in our work. And so for me, whether it was at Citigroup or at Liberty University or on the Board of Supervisors in my local Campbell County, or as a candidate for Congress and as a member of Congress, I take my faith where I go. I'm open about that. I ran as a biblical and constitutional conservative. I was told you can't win running as a biblical and constitutional conservative, but we're proud to serve the constituents of the 5th District and proud to stand for those from January 6th. We all condemn the violence. We all condemn those who broke the law on January 6th, and we want justice, but only justice, to be served. And what we were doing, to your point, your question of a moment ago, was challenging the Department of Justice for answers on reports that we're hearing about those who are being held without due process, those that we're hearing are being held in solitary confinement, and that we have a right to a speedy trial, we have a right to due process, we have a right to justice. And so we wrote a letter, our colleagues, to the Attorney General asking for a meeting. And then we showed up to try to get a meeting. We weren't allowed to visit the Department of Justice, so we held a press conference. And then colleagues, we went to the jails where they're being held and couldn't get inside there, and so we held another press conference. So we're just trying to stand up for justice for everybody in this country.
Well, I'm glad. And for those of you that don't know, there are quite a few of the remnant that are in and serving. And my question now is to connect Christianity with even our past as Christians, because you'll hear from some that, well, we're not supposed to be over there in the political world, but yet in the Bible, throughout the Bible, you had people in major places in government, all the way to the top, to the bottom, and throughout. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Yes, as a Bible verse says, you'll probably quote it better than me, but when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people perish.
Yeah, we mourn.
They mourn, yes.
We mourn.
And so if we are called to be salt and light,
yeah,
and we are called to influence the culture and to be ambassadors for Christ as believers, and that means in whatever line of work that we do, whatever profession, whatever the Lord lays our hand to, whatever circle of influence that he gives us, and we certainly need that in Washington. So much of what ails our country, really everything that ails our country, is a failure to follow God's principles for morality, God's principles for the family, and really the founding principles of our country is why we're in the trouble that we are as a nation.
Well, one of the founding principles of the Lord is on economic policy. That's yours. This is mine. I mean, that's what we saw even in Genesis. He said, you can have everything but that one tree. And then you saw a violation of private property at that one instance. And then we see it throughout the scripture. Nabal, I remember that, when David went out there, it was bad. You just can't take people's property. So I guess my question would be on the spending that's going on in Washington. How many people there that are in your circles are there to say it's not yours to give? You got to stop this theft is what it's really coming down to.
Yeah, there's biblical principles, as you said. Paul wrote that if someone doesn't work, they shouldn't eat. And it says in God's word that someone who doesn't provide for their family is worse than an infidel. So there's a personal responsibility that we have to work and to be productive, to be self-reliant, to help those in need, and to be compassionate, as we know. But we have a real problem with spending and with the role of government in Washington. You've got the Democrats who we know are spending recklessly and with abandon.
And on things that are not even theirs to do.
Absolutely.
These are not government's roles, as you just mentioned. That's for you to do over here. You provide for your family, and there are things government does.
Yeah, James Madysen said, I can't find the place in the Constitution that says that we're supposed to spend people's money for benevolent purposes. It's not in the Constitution.
Yeah.
But the problem is, as I heard somebody say recently, all the Democrats are really Democrats, but many of the Republicans are also really Democrats. And too many Republicans buy into the notion that growing government is good, government taking care of us is good, and government spending is good. They may not be as bad as the Democrats, but you watch how many Republicans will buy into this on the House side, this 1.2 quote-unquote infrastructure plan, which is only maybe 20% infrastructure,
I know.
or worse yet, the $3.5 trillion plan that's coming behind it.
That's right.
How many Republicans are going to vote for that? No Republican should vote for that.
No, they should not. And I'm glad to hear you say that because, there's such a manipulation now of the monies that are being sent to Washington. And you go out there and you see half those buildings that are now empty because of COVID. I guess they're working from home with government funded or tax funded laptops, but that they shouldn't even be doing that business. Is there enough energy, or do the people still have more to do to bring some folks that really believe it's not yours to give? This is not our role to, as you said, be benevolent. This is the role of family. This is the role of community. This is the role of church. This is the role of individuals to take your own life. In about 30 seconds, tell me, speak into how do we sever this? Just to get more elected officials?
Well, that really is the answer. The great news is we are still a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and we do hold the power. And I tell folks, you can't send bad people to Washington and think they're going to do good things. So we have got to rise up. I believe there's tremendous voters' remorse for what happened with this Democrat administration, this Democrat Congress. I think today we would dominate the elections if we had an election today. Unfortunately, we don't have a federal election for 15 months, and so we've got to stay engaged. We've got to take back our country. We do hold the power if we'll exercise it.
I do too. I believe that. In fact, it was Garfield, President Garfield, who sits out in front of the Capitol and says, hey, you have recklessness in government, it's because you voted for it.
That's
It's
right.
the people decided on this.
We get the government we deserve.
We get the government we deserve. So if you want a good, wholesome life for your family, and if you want, and your grandchildren to have at least a little bit of what you've worked for and that your parents work for, we better make sure that we have more Bob Goods up there. Thank you so much, Congressman, for stopping by. Yeah. We're enjoying this school. We're enjoying the business discussions and looking at the students come alive with some of this information. So it's very nice to see you here as well.
Thank you, Star.
Yeah, I'll be right back here on Cure America. I've got another special guest coming up right after this.
It's time for a cure. CURE is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
I'm Star Parker, and welcome to Cure America. I am at Liberty University here in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I am at the School of Business with David Brat. Can I still call you Congressman?
Dave.
All right,
Star.
Dave. I got to call him Dave, but I still think of you as Congressman, and now you're serving here at Liberty, the School of Business.
Yeah. Wherever God puts me.
Well, he put you here. So tell me about why we're here. I know I only have you 5 minutes. You're on and off the stage. We are going to visit with some of your very special guests, but why are you having a networking summit? What is this about?
Thanks for asking. We're a young university, 50 years old, and so teaching school, and we don't have a research department, but we believe in taking action in the real world. So a couple of years ago, we had a China summit up in D.C., brought in a bunch of senators and congressmen, et cetera, and the China experts and the China attaché from the White House. At that time, it was under Trump, to China. And so learned a lot there. And then that was more of a threat scenario of China. And then we said, who needs our help the most in the world? And the poorest of the poor are still in Africa. And I have friends here, African friends from Ghana, and on my faculty, we have several women from Nigeria, et cetera. And
I've met a few. This is like an international conference here. They flew in from all over the country and all over the world to come to this summit.
It's great. And so then, after spreading the gospel, Jesus says, feed my people. And I did my economics degree, in economic growth. And so you put all that together. So we had an Africa summit last April. Was phenomenal. Had World Bank, head of the World Bank, head of USAID, bunch of congressmen, Yoho, that wrote the BUILD Act, $70 billion for economic development for Africa, et cetera. And then we said, hey, we got to build up a bigger pool of CEOs, a big network, not only for Christian fellowship and to do business here, but to also feed into Africa in the years to come.
Yeah.
So this,
it is growing. It's interesting
it's growing,
because you have
growing.
the technology, and one of the reasons that I was fascinated is because you mentioned President Trump, and he signed into law that BUILD Act so that the investments would go into some of the countries. And we know down there in Congo and every place where they have like the cobalt, all the things that we need in terms of natural minerals. So let me ask you then about this, your theme, keeping Christianity in the culture. So you're approaching a lot of different areas. The technology one was fascinating. Is this going to happen? Are you starting to see with some of these African leaders that are trying to figure out how to make a country similar to ours, but they're very Christian in their mindset? Are they going to buy the economic side? Are you seeing some fruit there?
No, we think so. In sub-Saharan Africa, we had the vice president of Nigeria with us virtually last time. We got the president of Ghana coming on campus at the end of September this year, maybe with a couple other presidents. And I think what they like is just the Judeo-Christian tradition and common sense and no bureaucracy and no elitism. I think they're fed up with the World Bank and all the social agendas, and they just want to do business-to-business transactions with friends. And so at Liberty, we're good friends, 600 million Christian friends in Africa, right? And so... You know,
when people think of Africa, they forget it's a continent. They forget that you have like
60 countries,
there, and that some of them are very, very friendly to the ideas. They're new countries. Some of them didn't develop until the 60s. So they're really saying, what makes America work? Well, we know that Barry Asmus said what makes America work are basically Christianity and those principles, the virtues of the capitalism, and then the rule of law that we have. Well, this is something that's missing in a lot of those countries. So that was one area that I didn't hear discussed here. Is this a conference that's coming up soon? Because we had here government, you talked about the economy, you talked about technology, you had school, we had a whole, and we're getting into it with all of your guests. I pull a lot of them aside. But tell me then, are we going to see that steadiness in the I guess you would call it the safe community, safe space.
Right. No, I think you nailed it. And that's the way it worked in the U.S., right? It was first the Judeo-Christian tradition, then the rule of law, James Madison, the Constitution. He went to Princeton Seminary, where I went. He went before I did. And then Adam Smith, the economics. So the most important part, I think, is the Christian friendship piece.
That's right.
And if you got a leader that's committed to Christian principles, the law, Moses, et cetera, is right there.
It's right there.
Right? So you got the Christian commitment, then the law is implicit, and then the free market piece flows out of freedom. We're all created by God with certain talents.
That's right.
Uniquely. Right? And so if you get it straight, but it's hard. There's evil forces out there working all over the place in this country, in Africa, to just
and all over the world.
Beat up order, right? It's chaos and Leviathan versus order and God.
Well,
as usual.
One of the things that you've done, and I know that you're running out of time with me and have to get upstairs, and I have to get out of here to a break, but one of the things that I think you've done so well with this symposium basically is brought that energy, that positive energy of Christianity, and people are excited about getting it back in the culture in all these areas that you're talking about. So I appreciate that, and appreciate your leadership here at the School of Business.
I just came down from me. I'm worn out, and just seeing your smile and your energy. Are you kidding me? You're the leader in that category. We appreciate all your energy and.
Well, you're welcome.
Thanks for coming here.
You're welcome.
Great.
I'll be right back. With Congressman Brat was up in Washington for a while. He's here at the School of Business now, leading them into tomorrow. The kids here are learning about the future and how to keep their Christian principles alive. And we're just excited to be here. And I'm going to be bringing you some of his special guests that are here at this symposium after this break.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
Well, 2 days of session here. It's a summit at the School of Business at Liberty University. So I have to bring a student to you. I ran into a friend, Kevin Freeman. He actually has the War Room, economic, brilliant. And I do his show because he's economically brilliant. And he talks about free market principles and keeping America free and loving God. And now I have his daughter who's a Liberty University student, but from afar. Madysen, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I can't believe I ran into you, and you're so beautiful. I'm talking to your dad. I'm like, wait a minute. You're a student here. What are you studying?
I'm actually studying Christian apologetics right now.
That's incredible. So I said, where did you get that from? And your dad said, from her mom. I'm like, because I'm looking at him thinking, oh, no, I know who told you to do that, because he's so, shall I say, vocal about his faith. He's vocal about the role of government in our lives and how it should be limited, especially when it comes to how we look at poverty and other areas. And so when you said, yeah, I agree with my dad too, I thought, let me just bring you to our audience, because I think that it's interesting. So first of all, let's tell a little bit about yourself. You're a sophomore.
I'm actually a junior.
A junior,
right now.
okay,
Yes,
wow.
I currently live in Texas, and I'm working full time, and that's why I'm online.
Okay.
But apologetics is really my passion. I
Okay.
felt called to it when I graduated high school, and I love to talk to people about cultural issues
Wow.
and why we as Christians need to get involved with the culture.
Well, that's interesting, because it's a good closeout. This whole show for Cure America is on keeping Christianity in the culture, because that seems to be the theme of this particular summit here at Liberty University. And you say that you knew in high school. How did you know? There are some people that are watching right now and saying, she couldn't know. Did she go to a public school? How did she survive?
No, I was actually homeschooled.
Good.
And my parents, they took us to this worldview leadership camp called Worldview Academy. I started going when I was 14, and I ended when I was 18. That's when you age out. But it's all about cultural issues and how we as students and as Christians need to be involved with culture and telling people about biblical perspectives on issues and culture, especially public school kids, because they get indoctrinated every
Very
single
early.
day.
That's true. And that's one of the reasons that they do the Worldview Weekends. I'm glad to hear that that's where you got some of your early training, in addition to your parents saying, we're going to keep you focused, we're going to keep you Christian. And now you sound like you said, and I'm in agreement with that. I want to
Yes.
stay Christian. So tell us then about when you knew that I'm going to continue my education and then to come to Liberty University. Why did you choose a Christian college?
I really chose a Christian college because, like I said, I'm getting my degree in apologetics, and there's so many Christian schools nowadays that say that they're Christian and they do not teach biblical principles. And with a degree like apologetics, you really need to have a foundation of biblical principles. You cannot go out and preach the good news to people if you don't know what the good
If
news
you don't know
is.
what it is. Yeah. And it's interesting, because it seems you even have an appreciation, like your dad, that the good news means that you have gifts and talents, that you don't have to be dependent on a government, that maybe government doesn't have a role in expression of poverty and expression of charity. Could you elaborate on that? I was just fascinated that a young woman would say that, complete the sentence that I was asking of your dad.
Right. No, I absolutely believe in charity and charitable programs, that we need to be doing that. But as individuals and as churches, it nowhere in the Bible says that government should be giving handouts to people. In fact, it says quite the opposite. In Proverbs, it says, if you don't work, you don't eat. And so all these handout programs that we have nowadays aren't giving people the opportunity to work. They're just giving them money for free.
Yeah, when I think about how benevolent people are, and this comes up quite a bit in our discussions in Washington, D.C., that they're not doing enough is what we hear from the left. But I think about how benevolent people are. One, giving away multiple millions in this country, multiple millions abroad. Dave Brat, the president of the School of Business here, was telling us about their Africa program now, and how they're going into various countries to teach them these economic principles. So I guess I'm asking you, are people stingy like we keep hearing, or do you really think that the church and people themselves will get involved where we see people that might need a little extra help?
I think given the opportunity, and when people are told about the good news, and if they really believe in Jesus Christ, that they will want to be benevolent. And so part of helping people with charities is going out and spreading the good news. And once we have more Christians in the community, they will want to get involved, because that's part of the Great Commission.
Do you think that that's what happened? Did Christianity lose its place in society? Did we get a little complacent that we weren't making little Christians? Do you have circles of Christian friends?
Absolutely. I have circles of Christian friends, but they're from outside of schools.
Okay.
From church groups and from work, but a lot of them are kind of afraid, especially nowadays, to talk about their faith in public with how the culture is going and how angry people get
Yeah.
at you for being a Christian.
For being a Christian. So that's why apologetics is important. So maybe that's why you should tell them, well, maybe you should take a few of these courses. They'll teach you how to express your faith confidently and not necessarily have to be in an argument about it. Well,
Right.
one final question I want to ask you then is, in your encouragement, because you sound very encouraging, and you're encouraging me that we have youth out there that are willing to say, I'm doing it all the way in. You might be motivating someone to say, I'm going all the way in as well. Tell me a little bit about online training, because we already found out here at Liberty they have about 15,000 active students, but they have 100,000
Yes.
online. So tell us what that experience is like, because I think there might be a transition in our society that more people are going to say, I don't want the traditional way of doing this anymore, especially after COVID. More people are
Right.
comfortable staying home and learning, and with all the experience with computer now. So tell me a little bit, and tell everybody a little bit about how that works out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, my experience at Liberty University online has been great. It gives me the flexibility. Like I said, I work full time to be able to get my degree and work full time at the same time. And so for people who are looking for that, who want to pursue other passions while at the same time getting their degree, it's a great program. And I feel like I'm getting a world-class education at Liberty. I don't feel like I'm missing out just because I'm online. It's very collaborative. We have a lot of discussion boards.
Okay.
We get to talk to our professors. They give you their personal cell phone numbers, and you can just text them anytime you need something. And so it's very personal, it's very collaborative, and I highly recommend it for sure.
I am so excited about you. I am just so appreciative of meeting you here.
Thank
We
you.
were thinking about, and we're talking to others that are part of the conference, but to run into a student, I just really appreciate it. And I hope you do too, because this has been a very unique experience. Many people from all over the world are here, and yet the students are here as well, gleaning, learning, networking, and smiling. Thank you for bringing yours to us here at Cure America. I tell you, we are blessed to be able to come here to bring you some of the other shows we have. We've gone to NRB, we've gone and had the Congressional Wives in Washington, D.C. outside of studio, and we're able to do that because of you, because you give to Cure. I just really wanted to tell you again how much I appreciate. And for those of you that are saying, well, I want to give too, curepolicy.org is how you do that. Just visit us on the web, sign up. We'll even drop the show in your box if you're watching it on TV and you want to get it once a week on your email, and then you can share it with all of your friends as well. So I just really want to thank you for being with us here again on another episode of Cure America with Star Parker. We'll be back again next week, but I won't be here at Liberty University. I'll probably be back in studio. But thank you for watching us here, and God bless you and let him shine upon you. And I keep wanting to remind you of another scripture that came to me after I gave you the scripture last week, and the one that says, you know what? We know the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, because that's man's all.